We all have a story. Our nation, Australia, has one that is 60,000 years old. Our first people are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And we need to start by acknowledging that story. We are a nation of boat people on Aboriginal land. We are a country built on immigration and our Indigenous history. I have my own story. It starts with my grandparents. They themselves were refugees. I'm Bundian Greek. The Bundians experienced a genocide where 500,000 of my people were murdered. My grandparents were forced to become refugees themselves in the early 1900s. That genocide, like all genocides, tried to destroy their language, their culture, their people. That culture thrives and beats through me every day. I am its legacy. I am its victors against its persecutors, against those who try to bring to an end my people. My parents have their own journey and their own story coming here in the 60s like most migrants. Neither had an education before primary school. Each experienced great exploitation and racism when they came to this country. And that inspired me too. This country is writing a really disturbing story right now about refugees. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my story shortly, but the one that stays with me, the one that haunts me, is the story of refugees. These stories, when you're hearing them, you're not seeing the race, the nationality, the political views that they held. You're just seeing the human carnage, the agony, and the suffering. The stories that sit with me are the father who tried to take his own life in front of me, was bleeding out and I had to stop it from happening. The stories that sit with me are phone calls at 1 a.m. from a man an inch away from slashing his own throat because he was so terrified of being deported and trying to talk him out of that. The stories that sit with me are rushing to a hospital in the middle of the night to try to be by the bedside of a 10-year-old little girl because she just tried for the third time to kill herself. And that story stays with me always, thinking about how in the imagination of a 10-year-old child is there the idea of trying to hang yourself. You think of these little kids like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, kind of clicking their feet and wishing they could just say there's no place like home. The stories of refugees seep into your skin like another layer. They haunt you. They keep you awake at night. They test your faith in humanity all the time. Right now, the story we're telling is one that has some indisputable truths to it. One is that detention is harming children. I know of an 8-month-old baby right now that won't eat. I was listening to testimony the other day of a 3-year-old girl with epilepsy who had her medicine taken from her when she arrived at Nauru, standard practice, only to have a seizure. I know there are 128 children in the last year that have tried to hurt themselves. I know that in Nauru right now, children beg for clothes. A little girl begged for a book, just desperate to read something. They play with rocks. They're named by their boat ID number. I know that cruelty is extraordinarily expensive. Australia, this year alone, is going to spend 20% of UNHCR's global budget, which they would use to help 2 million to lock up 2,750 people on Nauru and Manus Island. There is no shortage of money when it comes to bad ideas. I know when talking about turning back the boats, all that means is please die somewhere else. And I know it breaches 5 international human rights conventions. Like locking kids up breaches 34 articles of the Refugee Convention. I know that letting more than 20,000 people perish, being denied the right to work in our community who are seeking our protection, weakens our economy, creates an underclass. As one man said to me, in this country, Kon, they just torture you in a different way. The scars are on the inside. It's about letting you know that you don't matter. It's about letting you know that you are nothing. As one man said to me, from nothing to zero I go. I remember comforting another father where he sat there and he said to me, I am neither a father, I am neither a husband, and I am neither a man, I am just nothing. And that decision costs our economy at least $1 billion a year right now. I look at this story of horror. I look at our total contempt for the rule of law and of human rights and of basic humanity. And one could just completely despair. But I refuse. I refuse to. I refuse to believe that the bank of compassion is bankrupt. I refuse to foreclose on hope. I refuse to allow another generation of refugees' human rights and future to be mortgaged away. We're not going to let that happen. Now imagine something different in this country. Imagine if we saw the opportunity that refugees offer this country instead of the imaginary, fictitious crisis. Imagine if we saw the potential rather than be sold the lie of burden and fear. Imagine if we unleashed our moral imagination rather than be held hostage by apathy and indifference. If we were to do that, anything is possible. If we are led by our compassion rather than the drumbeat of fear, we are unstoppable. Because we have two ways of going. We can either say, as Australians, we as a country are a lost generation, driven and poisoned by bigotry and fear. Or we can say, we are as a nation have had our hearts poisoned through 18 years of lies, and it's time to take them back. I'd like to think the latter. I'd like to think that anything is possible if we can see it, are willing to fight for it, and dream it. The Asylum Seeker Resource Centre that I run started up 13 years ago. I grew up in a crappy little country town that was extremely racist. I was meant to amount to nothing. My relatives used to warn my mum, Kon will end up in prison one day. He'll probably beat you in the end. I'm not kidding. These are the sort of relatives I had. My teachers told me to drop out of school because I would amount to nothing. And I remember at 18 going out into the community and just trying to find a way to connect. And I found this extraordinary community. I was working with homeless men. And here were these men who had nothing, but they had compassion, but they had openness, but they had heart. And I spent the next 10 years just absorbing it all, working with every walk of life you could imagine, and finding the common ground they all shared was extraordinary resilience and courage and tenacity. But they'd been excluded because they were poor, because they were different, because of the color of their skin or their sexuality, or their race, their age. When I was 28, I started the ASRC as a TAFE class project with a group of students I was teaching at the time. It got set up in 8 weeks. They had to do a project and they said, what about setting up our own little food bank? And the simple idea behind it was going, you can change the world at any time. People often call my centre radical because it does the following. One, it refuses to take federal government funding because through independence you can be fearless. You can stand up and advocate without fear or favour. Two, it's holistic. It sees the entire human being and understands you can't separate a person's housing from a person's health, to whether a person's got a roof over their head, to their self-esteem, to their sense of worth. Three, it actually believes in the community. My organisation has over 1,000 volunteers, has provided over 2.5 million hours of life-saving support to more than 10,000 people without a single dollar from the federal government. Because when you invest in the best in people, what a surprise they bring it to you. Imagine if we saw this different way and just scaled this. And here's how we can do it. Because I'm sick to death of talking about what's wrong without actually talking about solutions. I'm sick to death of charities sitting there and saying it's all just too hard. In the world of business, for all its predatoriness and consumerism and individualism, it's always looking for solutions. In the world of charity, we're just grateful to keep our heads above water. Those days have to end. Imagine if we took a different way. And here's where we start. One, we need an ecosystem of compassion. We need compassionate anarchy. You think about the fact that we might be a minority that care about refugees, but we're a minority of millions. Of millions. I've got 3,000 people right now waiting to volunteer for my organisation. I started counting that up and thought there's about 1 million hours of compassion and goodwill and kindness just sitting there. I just need to unlock that human capital. We need to be inspiring and connecting in every possible way we can, from the sandpit to our seniors' homes, practically, communally, digitally. We need to be having these conversations everywhere. Because always remember this: fear is learnt, racism is taught, love is the only natural state we actually have as human beings. And imagine if we start taking that compassion. Now, I often talk to people about we come to events like this, everyone walks away inspired and almost nothing comes of it. And I think what we're missing is the ability to franchise that compassion. We need an architecture of action. We need an ability to replicate and scale moments like this. And we need to think through how we can do that. Here's one simple idea I have. At the ASRC, we're going to create a thing called the Platform for Compassion. It's really simple. A digital platform where any one of you can go on and go, I have a room to offer a refugee. I have friendship, mentoring, a job, driving lessons to offer a refugee. I have furniture to offer a refugee, but I understand I need to get it to them because warehousing and bottlenecks are such a big part of the problem. And imagine if we could mobilize hundreds and thousands of you right here, right now, to reach the 35,000 asylum seekers that are living in conditions that you would find in a developing country. Overnight, we could end homelessness, isolation, and destitution through the click of a button. Why can't we? Because, ironically, charity itself has become the bottleneck. It's become the problem. Unless you can get into a charity, the best you can do is sign another bloody online petition. Or turn it to a rally that's hijacked by someone trying to sell you a socialist left paper. My heart sits with socialism, but seriously, those papers are... Imagine that ecosystem of compassion where we are connected through digital platforms, grassroots action, from the barbecue to our synagogues, to our mosques, to our churches, to our sporting clubs. Imagine if we could find just ways to keep connecting in that way. Imagine if we also started seeing refugees not as something that needed to be helped and saved and rescued, but actually focus on unlocking their potential. What if we actually stop thinking about what we can do for them and actually see that they are the ones that can lead their own destiny? Who are the world's greatest entrepreneurs, if not refugees? What do they all share in common? Resilience, resourcefulness, entrepreneurship. They live in extraordinary poverty in every industrialized city in the world and every developing city in the world. Why? Because of the collective poverty of imagination of our leaders. Not because of their will or their skill or their capacity, but because of that. We have globalization where we want everything. We want every piece of technology. It doesn't matter if it's made by children in a sweatshop somewhere. I just want it. But when human beings dare want the same thing, we say, oh no, we must protect our borders. We're so terrified of the idea of pull factors. God forbid this country be seen as one that actually doesn't kill people or torture people or offshore them to a developing country as their dumping ground. God forbid we're a country that appeals to people because we're compassionate and decent and moral and stand for something. God forbid. Imagine within that if we actually started seeing that refugees in fact are an extraordinary opportunity. In emerging markets, in a globalized economy, what better for the business world than a diversified workforce who actually knows he's how to get a footprint into Ethiopia or into Iran or into Iraq or into Zimbabwe, wherever it may be. They're our future. And all refugees actually need is a CEO. And I don't mean one of me. I mean they just need a circle of entrepreneurship and opportunity. There are 7 reasons refugees stay in destitution and poverty. And in no particular reason, they look like this. Now imagine it as a circle and it starts to grow. And with it, so does the opportunity and possibility. At the heart of it is language. Often never getting the language that's actually going to get them the skilled jobs they had back home. Imagine teaching them the same language that they were able to have back home to be a doctor or an engineer. I'm up to here with seeing refugees driving cabs and cleaning toilets. There's nothing dishonorable about that. My parents spent their life sacrificing in factories and farms so that I would have these opportunities. But Imagine what that's costing us. Imagine what we're losing. Next, work experience. Real, tangible, practical Australian work experience. We have a charity sector out there that outsources all our jobs to multinationals while then giving our own people food stamps and food parcels and transport tickets. Why the hell aren't we giving them the jobs and the experience and the opportunity? Imagine if we could orientate people through the systems. Here's how it works. And leverage the goodwill that's out there in business and community to navigate people through that. If we gave people access to capital, networks, pathways. I spend a lot of time in my work talking to very privileged people, considering supporting the work of my organisation. And I ask them, how did you get here? Sure, there's a 1 in 100 that was just extraordinary and just made it against all the odds. But the rest did because someone gave them capital, opened up a pathway, a network, a work experience opportunity. And I go, well, how about we do that for refugees? In my own organisation, we enable hundreds of our volunteers to get work every year simply through working there. Why aren't we doing it for asylum seekers? So we're about to. We're starting what we call the Asylum Seeker Innovation Hub, and it opens on Monday. It's a really simple idea, symbiotic innovation. The idea that we can co-collaborate with asylum seekers to actually achieve their potential. That we want people not just to survive, but we want people to thrive. Could you imagine that? People actually thriving. And in this innovation hub are all those things that are going to unlock people's potential. There's capital, there'll be incubators, there'll be social enterprise, there'll be leadership programs and mentors, and there'll be training, and there'll be English programs. But at the heart of it, the workforce will become that is driven by asylum seekers themselves. Leveraging off their expertise, their resilience, their innovation, and their capability. We want to build a model to end poverty for refugees, and we can do it as a country. Why is anyone poor in the second richest country on earth called Australia? Why? For God's sake, why? So imagine if we could create an ecosystem of compassion that creates that compassion and anarchy through an architecture of simple action. We end poverty through innovation by enabling refugees to actually drive their own destiny. Imagine if we can also create a disruptive humanity. We're always talking about technology. But what about if we could take technology, mobility, agility, and actually tackle and beat poverty down at its knees? We're so busy in the charity world building bigger centres and bigger bricks and mortar. But we're getting disrupted all the time by government policy that makes the numbers in need too great. Look at the local latest homelessness numbers nationally. Women's refugees numbers. Talk to any refugee organisation, any one of those worlds, we're all sitting there going, we can't meet the need. What if we went to where people were? What if we outreached to where the need was? What if we localised it? What if we did it in entrepreneurial ways? What if we created apps that allow people to find food fast or find housing fast through the click of a smartphone? Why aren't we doing it in our space? The reality is 86% of the world's refugees actually live in industrialised areas. And even though the industrialised world only takes 19% of the world's refugees, they live in squalor in every city, from Melbourne to Athens to New York to Geneva to London. So what about if we use technology to actually help people navigate through that maze and have that access? Imagine also if we could get to where people are, and we're going to try that through what we call the food justice truck, an entrepreneurial food van providing fresh food to where people are. And then finally, we can change the conversation. We can do that. But we've got to start with our young people and with refugees as the voices of that conversation. Let them lead it. Like a group of 8-year-olds that I spoke to last month, and I asked them, what do you call people who protect and stand up for refugees? And their hands flew up and they said, we call them proud. We call them heroes. We call them special. Our challenge and responsibility is about how do we take that pure empathy and love that those children have and protect it, bulletproof it, nurture it, feed that immoral imagination, teach our kids that that's what this country should stand for and what we can be. We can build a better planet for refugees. I ask you to join me in doing that, and I say, let's go. Thank you.